The first UFC pay-per-view installment is right around the corner. UFC 297 from Toronto, Sean Strickland, Dricus Du Plessis. And we brought in the heavy hitters to cover the first card of the year. Canada's beloved son, Spencer Kite, joins us to break down this card right down there. We'll be with you for the next hour or so. We're going to take you through this entire card. Like I said, first pay-per-view installment of the year. We'll judge it based off pay-per-view. Not the most exciting card on paper, it has to be said, but, similar enough was said for UFC 189, Spencer. We were there live. On paper, didn't really set the imagination flowing, but it was a great night. And it was a great night for Canadian mixed martial arts. And I think what can be said about this fight card as well, is that this could be another great night for Canadian mixed martial arts as well, all going to plan. Your thoughts, without going into too much detail on the fight, on the card as a whole, Spencer?
I think it's a really great opportunity. And before we even say that, hello, boys. It's nice to see you again. I've missed you.
We're getting straight in here.
This feels right. This feels right. Let's get into it, though. This feels like a really good encapsulation of what's happening in Canada right now. There is very clearly a next generation, a new wave of talent coming through both at the UFC level and overall across Canada. We're seeing some more events. We're seeing some more talent bubble up. There's going to be a unified MMA show in Toronto. Dana White and the Looking for a Fight crew were there the day before. There's some good prospects on that card. There's some good fighters on that card. And this feels like the opportunity for that next group of talent, which includes Mike Malott, Jasmine Jasudavicius, who are already settled in the UFC, Gillian Robertson as well, who's already there. But it's more to me for fighters like Sidey, for fighters like Brad Katona making his return to the UFC, and then even just the guys behind them that are a step away to see those opportunities. There's a bunch of gyms in the Greater Toronto area and down in the Niagara region that have all banded together to do a bunch of cross training that is, it's the rising tide lifting all ships. And I think we're going to see that with this event. So as a Canadian, as somebody that knows a bunch of these athletes, has followed a bunch of these athletes, it's really cool to see them getting this opportunity. And as somebody that grew up in and around sort of the Hamilton, Burlington, Toronto area, I know how much it means for a bunch of these athletes to be competing in Toronto this weekend.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll get into a little bit more detail on some of the fights in just a moment. Harry, I hope you're well. Your thoughts on this card coming in overall?
So I think that there are some very interesting matchups later down the card. I think that we are likely buoyed, or at least I am likely buoyed by the main event being two characters that maybe we haven't invested in as humans, right? It feels like Dricus Du Plessis has sort of come out of nowhere, even though he hasn't, right? His character seems to have come out of nowhere in that the media attention that he has garnered in the last sort of year is tenfold of what he's gotten in the rest of his UFC career, right? So it feels like we don't know who this guy is, whereas we've seen him fight, 5 or 6 times already. And with Sean Strickland, we don't need to go into conversations about his specific character and the way that he's divisive amongst MMA fans. So I think it's telling in the social media realms that a lot of what we determine a card's value to be on is how we view the characters in those top 2 slots. Because then when we look at Raquel Pennington and Mayra Bueno Silva is somebody that's got a great record in the UFC, but has sort of skirted on the outside, not really made a huge name for herself. Raquel Pennington, obviously a veteran, obviously somebody that we've known for a long time. But again, at 15-8, people look at her not as a title challenger anymore, but instead as somebody that has been around the game for a long time. Spencer, I thought you were going to say something. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just, yeah, I agree with your point. And it's really interesting because I think that's part of what lessens some of the appeal for a lot of people about that fight. But to me, it's a really compelling fight.
Right. Because we have, if we strip away the character profiles of both of these co-main events. Sorry, the co-main event and the main event. We have some really interesting styles matchups. Specifically in the main event, we have some really interesting styles matchups. I think the grappling in the co-main event is where I'm most interested. But then when we look down the card, Mike Malott, poor fucking Neil Magny, but Mike Malott getting the Neil Magny test, right? Chris Curtis and Marc-Andre Barriault. Barriault's been in a bit of a run recently. Curtis is a really good test there. Arnold Allen, Movsar, Evloev. I mean, Arnold Allen is honestly the blueprint for how not to take your career if you are a 145-pound title contender. He is buried as the opener of a main card in Canada, nowhere near his home. Like, okay, he might have.
He kind of has a little bit of ties in Montreal, I think, don't he?
Sure, but like, come on, like that's a loose stretch, lads. You know, if you're Arnold Allen on the win streak,
we can talk about Arnold Allen in a sec. Let's talk about that whole thing in a sec. Let's get straight into the main event and look at. You're spot on what you said about the characters of both of these gentlemen. That press conference that they held, and we haven't listened to what they have to say this week. That is all to come. Look, we could probably come here and spend an hour about how much that we disagree with a lot of the stuff that comes out with Sean Strickland's mouth. A lot of the stuff that came out with Dricus Du Plessis. I mean, two wrongs don't make a right when it comes to, certain comments that were made between two of these gentlemen. What we do have, and what Harry has said, is we have a very intriguing fight stylistically. We have a nice little rivalry that's brewing here as well, and that will continue to brew as the week goes on. And we have a champion in Sean Strickland, Spencer, that needs to go out there and defend his title and prove that it wasn't just a flash in the pan against Israel Adesanya, and that he is a champion that is going to stay in the top of the middleweight division for quite some time. But my question for you, does he have the capabilities? Does he have the skill set? Does he have the mentality to do that and to stay on the top of the heap?
I think the answer has to be yes, because of what he did in Sydney. Like, I'm not going to come here and completely undersell what he did. He took a fight on short notice on the other side of the world, had trouble getting into the country, still turned up and beat the hell out of Israel Adesanya. Now, is he at 100% and fully focused? We don't know. We won't know until we see Izzy again. But Sean Strickland went out there and did 100% of what he needed to do and was supposed to do and had to do to win that fight, and won it going away. And so I don't want to be somebody that sits down going into his next fight and be like, yeah, but that was crap and I don't think he's that good. I have long been the advocate for, as much as Sean Strickland is an absolute dickhead, he's a very good fighter. He has a bunch of talent. His style is frustrating. It's awkward. And I think because he doesn't finish a lot of people and he doesn't fight in a conventional manner, we're very quick to dismiss him. He's 8-2 since coming back. One of those is a narrow split decision loss to Jared Cannonier, and the other he got clattered by Alex Pereira, which these things happen in MMA. He's got the middleweight title around his waist. We know he's a solid fighter. Even if you just want to cap it at solid, he absolutely can go out here and beat Dricus Du Plessis. The thing that makes it fascinating, and I can't wait to get Harry's analysis of this fight, is that these dudes stylistically are mirror images of one another. They operate differently. Sean with the Philly shell, Dricus with his own herky-jerky sort of robotic-y, awkward flow. But at the core of it, they just want to come forward, put pressure on you, put you on the back foot, and make you wildly uncomfortable. And we're going to see which one of them is best at it on Saturday night.
Yeah, love it. To call him a mirror image, I can't honestly say I would agree, but I definitely would agree in terms of both of these styles that both of these guys have are awkward, clunky, but effective at the same time. And
yeah. The way they approach it is different. The way they execute is very, very different. But at its core, it's that awkward, make you uncomfortable, just come and be in your face and give you no chance to breathe and settle yourself.
For sure, big time. And look, I am of the opinion, and I don't know how I originally came here, but I think with Dricus's style, he does have the capabilities of getting a win here. Now he needs a couple of things to go his way. My pick for the fight, or for our official pick, is Dricus Du Plessis. I think that I've seen a little bit of something out of Sean Strickland in terms of, Austin Powers. He had his mojo. I've the last couple of weeks with Sean Strickland, and I think a little bit, after that press conference where he got a taste of his own medicine, he's kind of lost his mojo a little bit. At least I think he has anyway, or he appears to have. Now he could go in there and he could box the ears off of Dricus on Saturday night. But standing in front of Sean Strickland, if you're Dricus Du Plessis on Saturday night, is not going to be the way that you're going to win this. You've got to use that clunky style. You've got to mix up your grappling, your striking. You've got to make things awkward. You've got to make things ugly for Sean Strickland in here. If you're Sean Strickland, you're looking to do exactly what you did in the Israel Adesanya fights and in fights previous as well, is that you keep that fight standing, you use that Philly shed, you feint like a motherfucker, and you confuse the shit out of Dricus Du Plessis en route to, a likely decision. Harry, in assessing both of these gentlemen, where do you see the positives and negatives on both sides? Where do you think both of these guys can be got? Or where do you think that they can kind of, use the other guys' skills against them in certain terms? It's a difficult one to analyze. I'm curious to hear how you can analyze it because of these guys' clunky, unusual, but effective styles.
So I think that you can whittle it down to a few overarching factors. Sean Strickland is somebody that stands very, very tall. That's not something conventionally that you would teach your fighter to do, right? He generally stands with his legs very close together. In sort of a semi-staggered, semi-square stance, and obviously he adopts that Philly shell. He's got very loose arms, and I don't mean that negatively, because that's what allows him to throw at the volume and at the clip that he does do, is because he's not holding tension in his arms until he gets to the apex of his punches. Dricus Du Plessis is the entire opposite. He fights like his ribs are too big for his body, like his arms are so close, far away out here somewhere, and he throws as if his shoulders are 3 times the size of what his skeletal frame can actually manage. The difference, I think, is if Sean is able to deal with the athleticism of Dricus Du Plessis, and if Dricus Du Plessis is able to maintain a gas tank over Sean Strickland. I think those are the two really, really, really pivotal points here. Both can take damage, both can land damage in different fashions. We have seen Sean take a big shot and go down. I don't think Dricus hits as hard as Alex Bahia hits, but he certainly is a hitter. Sean Strickland is a death by 1,000 cuts type fighter, and it feels to me as though Dricus Du Plessis is somebody that's susceptible to that sort of style. He's susceptible to somebody who will stay in your face and will be technically proficient enough to deal with the explosivity and the jamming and the big blasts into range. But I don't think Dricus is as technically proficient or technically sound as somebody like Sean Strickland is. But where we get to in this middleweight division is sometimes the most technical fighters don't win, and sometimes the most technical fighters don't even look good in performances. I can foresee here that Sean Strickland goes out, puts a jab in Dricus Du Plessis' face, lands loads of body kicks and lands some leg kicks, takes some of the pop out of those explosive entrances. And then Dricus sort of seems a little bit like Paulo Costa versus Israel Adesanya in their fight, where it's a little bit like a sitting duck type situation. Because if the range game isn't working for Dricus, if he doesn't feel like he's able to explode into those explode into the ranges where he is effective, then he won't. Right? Because he knows he's going to get punished. And for the same vein, if Sean Strickland feels like the pressure game is going to allow Dricus to level change and bomb through a double leg and find himself either up against the fence or on the floor for a while, then that's going to be a problem for him too. Equally, you can absolutely see Dricus driving through that range, finding an overhand right, clipping Sean Strickland and putting him away. Just a last tidbit here. Dricus Du Plessis recently competed in a grappling tournament in a quintet format. For those of you that don't know what a quintet format is, there's 4 teams, 5 people on each team. 2 teams face off against each other, and then the winner of that face, obviously the winner of the previous bracket. The idea being that if you win your match, you stay on. If you draw your match, both people go out. Dricus took out an entire team of a variety of different sizes just by being an athlete. He wasn't great. He just double-legged everyone, got to side control, and just Kimura'd people. And I'm not saying that Sean Strickland is going to see the same fate, but there's levels to this athleticism game, right?
I can see it kind of going that way, like in terms of, you know, I don't think if you're Dricus Du Plessis here, you can't stand in front of Sean Strickland and fight this technical striking game. First of all, he doesn't have the capabilities of doing that, and second of all, like Sean and me were talking on the big podcast this week, Spencer, it was the jab of Robert Whittaker that was getting through on Dricus Du Plessis all the time, and he had to make those adjustments. I can kind of see it going down a similar route where, you know, yeah, obviously you're going to have some moments on the feet here, but I think the real key here is Sean Strickland's ability to keep this on the feet, and Dricus Du Plessis trying to come in and grind and get this fight and get Sean Strickland off his back, where he is very good in top position and he can land quite a bit of damage there too if he's allowed to.
Yeah, the grappling piece is going to be really interesting to me. Elliot Marshall and I, as we talked for the Coach Conversation series, really kind of focused in on it because both of these guys want to put their opponents on the back foot. Who's going to be able and who's going to show those really good, quick, reactive doubles if they need to? If we get to a situation where this isn't going my way, what's the opportunity for me to change this up? Because I think you're right. You look at the Rob Whittaker fight, Dricus did well because he started bombing away and just outpowered and out-physicaled and bigger, more athletic dude than Rob Whittaker and put it on him. Didn't have to wrestle that much, but he has wrestled in the past. We've seen some of those submissions, obviously put Darren Till on the ground, choked him out, which, you know, Darren Till, not a great wrestler, but still. Sean has it. That's the really interesting piece of this, is that Sean Strickland can wrestle. Sean Strickland is a good grappler. He just chooses not to use it. And so could this be a time for either of them, really, where instead of going out and trying to win just a straight up fist fight, one of them says, I'm going to be the more complete mixed martial artist and go out and use this wrinkle that the other guy may not be expecting? Because I've talked to enough people in Sean's camp that have always said throughout these last bunch of fights, we tell him every time, we drill it every time, everything else of your game gets better if you even just hint at it, if you even just put that little thought in Dricus Du Plessis' mind. It applies on the opposite side as well. If Dricus goes out there and in the first round just decides, I'm going to change levels just to grab that lead leg or maybe run through a takedown and just put you down, doesn't even need to hold him there, doesn't need to do any damage. Just get him down for 30 seconds so that Sean has to go, this is here. It changes up this fight because, as you said, Io, if they just stand and trade, I think it becomes Sean Strickland jabbing the face and outstriking Dricus Du Plessis, because I think Sean can avoid and take the big power shots more so than Dricus can take the 1,000 cuts that are coming his way.
100%. Yeah, I couldn't agree more there. Last question for me, open-ended question, whoever wants to come in. Do we think the level of activity for Sean Strickland over recent months is somewhat of a worry coming in here? Not alone the fights that he's had. Obviously, he had 2 in quick succession with Abus Magomedov and then going into that Israel Adesanya fight and then pretty much going straight into camp for this fight then after the fact. We know Sean Strickland doesn't like to spar easy. He spars hard. We've seen him in front of the camera ahead of this fight with cuts under one eye, cuts above another eye. So it's something that kind of raised a little bit of a red flag. Am I thinking too much into that, or do you think, you know, is it an option? Dricus, I think, you know, made the correct decision not to go over to Sydney, Australia, to take on Israel because of that reason, because he felt he wasn't going to be ready. So, you know, he's got himself in prime position and seemingly so has gotten a good camp ahead of this one. What are your thoughts on that? Maybe I'll ask Harry that before we move on rather quickly.
I don't know is the answer. And I think that it feels like Sean Strickland can go one or two ways. He could either have an air of the Alexander Volkanovski, where activity means he doesn't have to deal with the downtime and everything that comes with that. Or it could be that we have seen previously that when he's in the spotlight, he often seems to tie himself up in knots sometimes with specific things that he says or topics that he covers. I'd like to err on the side of, if he's in camp and he's focused and there's something to aim for, then I'd like to think that that's the best thing for him, right? But in the same vein, there's no bigger spotlight than heading a UFC pay-per-view event and defending a title on it. So I don't know is the answer. In terms of hard sparring, it's just who he is. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is just who he is.
It's going to catch up on him eventually, one way or another, whether it's Saturday night, whether it's not Saturday night. But one last final thing on me with Sean Strickland, when you're the guy, when you're in chasing that dream of becoming the champion, you know what? He has it. He's tasted it. Now everybody is coming and everybody has the target on Sean Strickland's back. Can he handle that mentally?
That's the piece for me that really I can't wait to see on Saturday.
Yeah, and we're going to find out.
Going into Sydney, it was no one expected anything from him. Zero. Mm-hmm. Now you're the guy that walks out last with the belt on your shoulder, and everybody is expecting everything from you, and all the media is on you, and all the attention is on you. You've added to that with all of the chicanery beforehand. How do you hold up?
Very interesting to see. We will find out in just a few days. We'll also find out about the co-main event, Harry. Raquel Pennington versus Mayra Bueno Silva. Interesting fight. Obviously, look at the last dance for Raquel Pennington. She was the backup fighter for the last bantamweight fight over at UFC 189. Coming in here, kind of maybe a simple analysis on this for me is kind of like the rabbit versus the tortoise. And I feel that Mayra Bueno Silva is going to come out here like the clappers early days and try and get Raquel Pennington out of here rather early, round 1, round 2, and it'll be up to Rocky to try and weather that storm and try and bring Mayra Bueno Silva into the later rounds where she has shown kind of glimmers of slowing down a little bit. And I feel that if this fight gets into round 3, we're kind of amongst the fight in another fight here, and I'm very curious to see if she can get there. How do you assess this fight, Harry?
Tie your hands behind your back and you win the fight. That's it. If you don't allow arm bars, you just win. Like, that's it. I mean, look, if we look through Mayra Bueno Silva's performances, if we look through the style that she fights, if we look through the way that she fights, she's hella aggressive. She chases the submission, and she generally gets fights done inside the first 10 minutes, right? Raquel Pennington is far more of a grinder. She's far more of a conservative, just a steam train, right? You want to, if you're fighting Raquel Pennington, fight exactly how Mayra Bueno Silva is going to fight. You need to try and force her to fight hard early, so that then it's a struggle for her to then build through the gears as she gets through those latter championship rounds. If you're Raquel Pennington, you want to slow Mayra Bueno Silva down. I think the question for me and the real interesting point of this fight is how those first 2 rounds look. Because how do you slow Mayra Bueno Silva down? You don't want to take her down, because she's more than happy to play from that guard position, which, sucks as it's 2024 and, we're still playing guard in MMA. But that is a real threat. And so if you're Raquel Pennington, do you just focus on forcing Mayra Bueno Silva up against the cage, trying to force back body locks, trying to force back exchanges, turtle exchanges, and using those sorts of maybe more Dagestani style of sequences where you're wrist riding and forcing Mayra Bueno Silva back up, lots of knees to the backs of the hamstrings, lots of uppercuts from underneath the armpits. But that's not really the style that we've known Rocky to look for, right? And so can she adapt at 35 years old to bring something brand new into her style? I don't know is the answer. And if you're going to stand on the feet with Mayra Bueno Silva, she just throws fucking haymakers. And so again, for Rocky, how do you deter her from doing that? Are we going to see a more cultured jab from Raquel Pennington? Are we going to see her do what lots of women try to do, and that's, I'll just take her down and I will test my skills against her? Maybe. I don't know how she slows Mayra Bueno Silva down in those first 2 rounds, but if she does, and if she's able to get through, I think I completely agree with your point. If we get to round 3, I'm heavily favoring Raquel Pennington in this fight.
For sure. I think number 1 and the most important thing coming in here for Rocky is just being defensively aware in rounds 1 and rounds 2. You need to kind of have that sussed out. You need to make sure of your distance management. You can't get too close. You can't get too far away. You've got to remain active and in the fight. If Raquel Pennington can even steal one of those first 2 rounds, I mean, she's going to be in a prime position coming into 3, 4, and 5, where she only has to win 2 of those 3 rounds as well. So it's kind of like I said, Spencer, kind of two little mini fights inside of one big fight here over 25 minutes, even if it goes that far. What's your assessment? What's your read on this one?
Exactly that. You're spot on. The whole way through anything I've written about this fight, I've said it feels like it is two fights. If we end early, good likelihood that Mayra Bueno Silva is a world champion. If we get into the later stages of things, gets all kinds of interesting because we have seen her start to flag in some of these fights, more so at flyweight than she has at bantamweight, but that's also because she's gone out and trounced people at bantamweight. She's incredibly fascinating to me because she's a different kind of physical. She's a different kind of aggressive in her approach than I think really anybody else in the division that I can think of offhand. Like, she's not coming out and taking her time to look for things. She is opportunistic. She's diving on she's diving on things in a way that we haven't seen in this division in quite some time. The armbar of Stephanie Egger, the knee bar of Lena Landsberg. And I mean, look, when you get Holly Holm panic tapping to a ninja choke, that tells you how deep that thing is and how gnarly that squeeze is. Yes, it's a no contest. It got overturned, whatever. She has looked to me like the best fighter in this division, save for Amanda Nunes, over the last year. And so it's really going to be on Rocky to navigate those first 10, 15 minutes and have some success and tire her out and wear her down, use all that veteran guile, and then be able to pull it out later in the fight. I think the benefit of living and training in Denver is going to be a factor here. That altitude, that conditioning, it's never been an issue for her. Got to lean on it here.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. That's a great assessment. And I don't think there's too much to be said about that co-main event, to be honest. In somewhat, the kind of fight itself has been shot on a little bit, but when you kind of look into it, it is an intriguing kind of stylistic matchup. And, this young, well, not necessarily younger Mayra Bueno Silva, but this like lesser experienced Mayra Bueno Silva coming in against the old dog and Raquel Pennington. So it'll be interesting to see how that lines up. Harry, you highlighted poor Neil Magny ahead of this one. It seems like this is like an occurrence every 2 months or so. Whenever he's fighting, it's always Neil Magny against this young buck coming in here trying to kind of beat this gravel veteran, and he's still there. He's still relevant. He's still doing the damn thing. But he's back against the wall here again when he's coming up against a guy like Mike Malott, who's been looking pretty sensational inside the octagon from what we've seen so far, fighting in his own backyard, fighting with the fans behind him, and fighting with a hell of a lot of confidence coming in here against Neil Magny.
2020 saw Neil Magny fight Robbie Lawler. Since then, Michael Chiesa, Jeff Neal, Max Griffin, Shavkat Rakhmonov, D-Rod, Gilbert Burns, Phil Rowe, Ian Machado Gary, and now Mike Malott. Lads, what are we? I mean, look, what I will say is this is, to me, a more interesting test for Mike Malott than the Ian Gary one was. I think it was relatively obvious that if Neil Magny was not able to take down Ian Gary, this fight was done, right? With Mike Malott, I find that there is more intrigue in terms of, can Neil Magny impose the Neil Magny style? And I think it's a more even matchup. My question is it an even matchup for who Neil Magny should be, or what Neil Magny are we going to find at the early turn of 2024? After that run in the last 3 years, there is a time when 32 professional MMA fights, not only 32 professional MMA fights, but 32 UFC performances starts to take its toll, right? And it starts to mean that the person that you were and the value that you had starts to trickle and starts to fade a little piece. What do we know Neil Magny for being? Incredible gas tank, very, very tough, very well-rounded, and able to impose his skills on the up-and-coming fighters that may or may not be destined for larger things. Will he be able to bring in an incredible gas tank? You're damn right he can. Definitely. Is he going to be able to bring in incredible toughness? That's a question. Is he going to be able to impose his skills? Well, we've already said 30 plus fights in the UFC, 36 years of age. Those fast twitch muscle fibers are not what they were. Those slow twitch muscle fibers aren't what they were. There will be that old man strength in MMA terms. That old man strength that starts to kick in. Is that going to be enough against the Mike Malott? We will find out. But I'm leaning Mr. Malott here because I just think that youth, exuberance, he feels like a fighter to me that will take all of the energy of that crowd, all the energy of that week, and use it in a positive way rather than a negative way. And Neil Magny's 36 years old, and so
yeah,
I don't know.
It's a tough one. I think the thing about it, Spencer, is that there's been many a blueprint printed for defeats of Neil Magny as well. You know, we've seen Ian Machado Gary kind of go in there and kick the legs off him the last time. You know, we've seen other fighters get at him too. And as much as it kills me to say, I have to be honest when I'm looking at Neil Magny fights, or especially guys who are going in to fight Neil Magny. And my litmus test is he going to win? Is this young guy, or is Mike Malott going to win by decision, or will he have enough to finish Neil Magny? And it's sad for me to say that, especially at this stage of his career, because Magny is such a legend. He's such a dog, a warrior for going in and staying, putting himself in these situations against these young, hungry fighters. It's not an easy thing to do, Spencer. And I know you're a big fan of Magny as well.
Yeah, certainly a big fan of Magny. If you ask that question to Mike Malott, as I'm sure we both did when he was out in Vancouver at 289, about whether he was going to get the finish or not, he will tell you by strike or by strangle. This thing ain't going the distance. That is his creed. 10 for 10 so far in his victories. That's what he's aiming for. I talked to Neil Magny before this. Story is up now on UFC.com. Shameless plug. We talked about all of this stuff, right? Like we talked about, this is the 487th time you've been in this position. And he honestly and openly, I really believe quite insightfully said, nobody put me here other than me. Like, I get building some momentum, then I got to beat one of these guys, and I can't beat them. And then I win one, and I get back, and here he is. The thing that sticks out to me is exactly what Harry talked about. And when you went through that list of guys that he's beaten, with all due respect to the Phil Rose of the world and the Max Griffins, who I have a lot of respect for and a good relationship with, that's not the same as when he was beating Jeff Neal, when Jeff Neal was on the come up, right? Those fights, he's barely getting by Max Griffin. He's barely getting by Phil Rowe. And those guys aren't as dangerous as Mike Malott, who hits like a truck, who has a very good grappling acumen, is a legitimate black belt, has all the work that he did at Alpha Male. We saw the guillotine in Vancouver, and is going to be like, Ian, you and I were in Vancouver for his last fight. He was the breakout star. He was thriving in that energy.
He really was.
He grew up 45 minutes down the road in a tiny little town of Waterdown, Ontario, and has been dreaming about this moment since he was 14 years old. And everybody at Hillfield Strathallan College, where he went to school, was saying, what do you mean you want to be a fighter? Nobody wants to be a fighter. I love Neil Magny. I think his career is going to go down as one of those incredibly impressive things that we should remember and talk about going forward, much like Jim Miller. I don't think this is his weekend. I don't think this works out very well for him. I think this is part 2 of the Mike Malott coming out show.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, what we get the luxury of, Spencer, is being in the same room before these guys when we're at live events and Harry as well. Of course, Harry's been in that situation too, but where you're there, and you can feel the energy off them. You can feel how they portray themselves. And I don't know, it's such a straight, like, I'm not this big guy that's fucking into crystals and energy and fucking star signs and all that shit, but you can
fucking lie.
I'm Sagittarius, by the way. But it's like, you can feel the energy from Mike Malott, and you could feel it at 189, and I'm sure it's going to be the same here, and it's going to have that extra acceleration as well coming into this Toronto card in his backyard as well. Very, very interesting. This is, goes out there, gets a finish over Neil Magny. He is right in the mix in the welterweight division in the UFC. So I'm looking forward to seeing if he can have that breakout performance. That's going to be an exciting fight. Harry, 185 middleweight. Chris Curtis, Marc-Andre Barriault will go at it. 2 war horses going at it in the middleweight division here. Barriault's been on a good run. He's looked impressive at 189. Chris Curtis has been somewhat hot and cold in his recent tenure in the UFC, obviously coming off a loss. Well, actually, it was that no contest.
Keeps getting headbutted.
Yeah, he does. It was a headbutt by Imamov in his last fight. And coming in, Jesus, if he takes a headbutt off of Barriault too, he's going to have a story to tell, because that guy has a head like a cylinder block, so he does. And this is an interesting one, Harry, in the middleweight division.
Sure, look, both can crack a bit. Chris Curtis is maybe a little bit more tricky than Barriault. Barriault is a very traditional kickboxer. I'd like to see one or both of them turn this into an actual MMA fight, but I'm not sure that either of them will. I suspect that this is 3 rounds on the feet. Curtis is quick, but Barriault hits quite hard. I like some of Chris Curtis's footwork. I like some of his defensive head movement. His countering can be really, really nice. Barriault's just a bit of a hammer. Do you know what I mean? Like really long jab, really long right hand, some nice low kicks, some nice body kicks. But both guys, you mentioned Chris Curtis is sort of hot and cold. Barriault's a 50-50 fighter here in the UFC, and that's kind of how I feel about the fight itself. It's pretty much a 50-50 fight. If Barriault can come in and sort of start to win the size battle, the physical battle, and push Chris Curtis backwards, then Chris Curtis, we have seen, can fight fine on the back foot, but doesn't necessarily like being there. He'd much prefer to be on the front foot, circling, making those angles and firing off those right hands. And I mean, it's a fight. It will happen. Fair play to both men.
There you go. Spencer, anything that you have to add on this fight?
I just think we'll know in the first kind of 2-3 minutes of the fight how it's going to play out. If Marc-Andre Barriault can come out and be the more physical guy, you look at previous fights outside of this division, right? Chris Curtis used to be a welterweight, kind of where he fits. Middleweight is a good spot for him, doesn't have to cut a lot of weight. Marc-Andre Barriault has fought up at 205. He is physically the bigger man. And so if he's able to go out there and sort of just close the distance and make this grimy and gross, it'll be a fight that happens, but it'll be a good win for him if he can do that.
Yeah, I feel like from the physicality and strength perspective, it's like, I could see both these guys standing toe-to-toe and probably Chris Curtis getting the better of the exchanges. So it's going to be up to kind of Barriault, in my opinion, to break that kind of cycle of Chris Curtis, put his back against the wall. We've seen Chris Curtis get frustrated when fights are not going his way. Barriault has to go out there and frustrate him, and I feel that he has enough to get the job done if he can do that. Look, at the fight that we will talk a good bit about here is Arnold Allen versus Movsar Evloev. Harry, you did have some thoughts on the kind of position of this fight and where it's located. I cut you off rudely enough at the start. Please continue, sir. Pick up where you left off.
Look, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? Arnold Allen goes on a 438 fight win streak, right? 10 fight win streak in the UFC, which is, almost unheard of, specifically in the 145 pound division. Now, okay, is he fighting elite level competition the entire way through? No, he's not. Is he calling the shots as he should be? No, he's not. Is he fighting to the best of his ability? Yes, he is. Is he getting better every single time we see him? Yes, he is. That Sadiq Youssef, Dan Hooker, Calvin Kattar run. Obviously, Calvin Kattar was really unfortunate the way that it ended. But he then goes in, and after that Calvin Kattar, or even after Dan Hooker, the time was then to say, "Give me the title shot," or "Give me the guy," or "Give me this." And instead, he's like, "Oh, I really like Tesco meal deals, and Max Holloway's a nice fella, and so I wouldn't mind getting punched in the face by him, I guess." And so the UFC give him the Max Holloway grinder. And nobody needed to see that fight, right? We were calling at the time that we didn't need to see Max Holloway fight every single up-and-coming number 2, number 3 ranked contender in the division and just give them the fucking title shot. And so instead, he goes in with Max Holloway, and Max Holloway does Max Holloway things. And now, how's he repaid? Well, he's shipped off to Canada and opens up a main card. What is he, a fucking shit 265 pound fighter? Like, come on, what are we doing? And against Movsar Evloev, immediately what the UFC has done here. And I think that this is tantamount to some of the rhetoric in the UFC is Movsar Evloev is a really interesting prospect, right? Like, certainly has some upside. Both of them certainly have some upside. But it feels to me as though you are able to give Arnold Allen give Arnold Allen, lol. Put Arnold Allen in this spot. If he wins, he knocks off another contender of Movsar Evloev, and he's right back in that elite upper echelon picture in that 145-pound division. If not, then Movsar Evloev comes in and takes this guy out that's now 2-1 in his last 3, and you're further cementing sort of that snapping of the win streak. And I don't know. You're
very frustrated about this, aren't you? I can see the frustration coming through. Where's the most of it coming from?
I think it's because when you have somebody like Arnold Allen who goes out, he did everything. You go to Cage Warriors, you win the Cage Warriors title, you get the golden ticket, you're off to the UFC. You work your way up, right? You do a couple of European fights here and there. You get a really tough fight against Mads Bonnell that you were losing. You manage to grind it out, get a win. Great. You face Makwan Amirkhani and you looked fantastic in that fight, even though he's the dominant wrestler. He's this, he's that. You hone your skills. You change your entire life. You go to TriStar, you figure it out. You're doing this. You're in and out of camp. You suffer the injuries. You do this. The entire epilogue of the story is there. All of the points are there. And then he gets to the apex. He beats Dan Hooker, beats the brakes off him in an absolute crazy fight. And then he's like, just like Tesco meal deals. Like, that's the moment that you capture the lightning in the bottle, and he didn't. And then you got another chance with Calvin Kattar. Okay, it ends how it ends, but you still say, sure, look, I had a very competitive round with an elite level guy in round 1. Round 2, he comes out and does something fucking mental and his knee splashes. Fine, whatever. But then there's just from Arnold Allen, from a financial perspective, he's not capitalized on his career the way that he should have. For Arnold Allen, from an athletic perspective, you have to take the chances, I think, a little bit better, or at least you have to try and force the chances a little bit better than he has done. And so now we are here with this opportunity, and this is just classic 101, what the UFC is going to do to fighters that aren't marketing themselves proficiently enough. And that's, here's another absolute fucking murderer, potentially, in Movsar Evloev that could just wrestle fuck you for 3 rounds at, of the main card opener of UFC 297. And there's something that just gets me about that.
It's the missed opportunity.
Yeah.
It's the missed opportunity in also getting a couple of fights that we didn't really need. That's what I feel. Like, I think we did a live watch along for the London show where he just absolutely goes out there and hits Dan Hooker with everything, including the kitchen sink, and then gets on the mic and is like, well, Calvin Kattar's 1 spot ahead of me. And we all just shouted. Like, what? That should have been, I want Volk. Volk's next. Let's go. And then when that doesn't happen and it's Calvin Kattar and that happens and fine and it goes the way it goes, I respect and appreciate Arnold not coming out and being like, all right, that's 10 now, and overplaying that win. But it still needed to be, well, I've won 10 straight. What more do you want me to do? And when they came with Max Holloway, he should have said, go fuck yourself. Because I'm not doing it. I've won 10 straight. If this guy beats me, what are you going to do? Have him fight another guy on the come up? Because he's now lost 3 straight to the guy with the belt. And so we've gotten into this position where we've had to watch Yair Rodriguez win an unnecessary interim title by beating the brakes off of Josh Emmett and then get absolutely trounced by the Lord and Savior of the featherweight division, Alexander Volkanovski. And now, great that Ilia Topuria has flourished the way that he has and risen through the ranks. But like, this one to me is just it doesn't really move anybody anywhere again. Like, this seems to be the pattern of this division, is regardless of what happens here. So if Arnold Allen goes out and beats Movsar Evloev, hands him his first loss, gets right back in the win column, he's going to come out and say, well, Josh Emmett needs an opponent, and we're not going to get anywhere. And if Evloev goes out and if Evloev goes out and wins, people are going to say, well, look though, Arnold's wasn't as good as his record indicated. So this guy that's at 10 or 9 or wherever he's at, let's move him up, and Josh Emmett needs an opponent. Like, we're just spinning our wheels here. To me, the interesting thing about this is Evloev turns 30 next month. This is a guy that feels like he's been around forever, and we've been waiting for him to take this step and become that real contender. Like, the fact that Topuria has lapped both of these guys very quickly and very clearly to become the best under 30 talent in this division, really, to me, should put some pressure on each of these guys.
Mhm.
Evloev didn't look good against Diego Lopez. Now, we've come to learn that Diego Lopez, dangerous, absolute lunatic in there. But like, he took that fight on 4 days' notice, and Movsar Evloev struggled. So is this guy the goods? Is this guy as good as 17-0 indicates? I know we all were super high coming off the Dan Ige fight. He's got to go out and show something on Saturday, to me, because we know the standard that Arnold Allen is. But more so, it just feels like this is one of those fights that it looks great. It's going to be a really interesting fight. I can't wait to see this fight from a fan perspective, from a analytical perspective, but it's got to do something. Like, the winner of this can't fight Josh Emmett. They can't get stuck in with Max Holloway. Like, it's got to move something forward, or else what are we doing here?
It's up to, like, the UFC are not going to do it like Harry said, though, because so it's up to these guys. You made a very excellent point about Ilia Topuria. You know, his skills inside the octagon, but also his mouth has got him
100%.
into a position that he's been there too. And, you know, that's the sad reality of the situation that we're facing inside the UFC, is that you're going to go on your 8, 9, 10 fight win streaks, and, you know, that alone is not enough to get you the rewards that you deserve. And in another world, I kind of feel that this fight should be a number one contendership fight, a co-main event for over 5 rounds. Maybe stick it in, you know, probably you could stick it in the main event of a fight night card in front of a live audience.
Exactly
as well.
Where it should have been.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, yeah, it's strange. But Harry, over to the kind of analytic side of things when both of these guys match up. I was amazed to see that Arnold Allen is the betting underdog heading into this fight. Are you surprised to hear that? And do you feel that he is the underdog coming in here?
I'm not surprised to hear it, but I don't think he's the underdog either. I think Arnold is very tricky on the feet, right? Insanely strong. Really, really, really solid when it comes to just general down blocking and general awareness. I think there is something that Faras does very, very well over at TriStar, and that's just game planning for opponents and drilling those game plans over and over and over and over and over again. And if there is something he knows a little piece about, it's grappling. And if he doesn't, there's some bald French fella that knows a couple of things about grappling in that gym, and his name's Pierre.
I'm not impressed by your performance.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that there's a wealth of knowledge there. There's a wealth of understanding there. The thing that I fear for with Arnold is he's very much a rhythm fighter, as is Movsar Evloev. And we saw against Diego Lopez that Diego was like, rhythm? Fuck rhythm, bro. This is Mexico, and watch this. And just was so active off his back that Movsar was not able to get the reactions that he was expecting from those grappling exchanges, right? And so Arnold is very similar when it comes to the footwork on the feet. That's one of the downsides of the TriStar fighters is they're very rhythmic. They're expecting reactions and they're expecting counters to reactions. And so the thing that concerns me for both fighters, frankly, is if Movsar starts failing those takedowns. We saw against Nick Lentz the use of the guillotine to continually force Movsar to reset from those wrestling exchanges. Now, it wasn't enough to win the fight for Nick Lentz, fine, but those sorts of things for Arnold, if he's able to beat the range play, if he's not able to give Movsar that lead, like if he's constantly switching stances, if he's forcing Movsar to shoot on more naked takedowns than he is used to, then we are going to see Arnold Allen get his hand raised here. If, however, we see Movsar start to get some success in setting up grappling exchanges and Arnold doesn't do the I'm just going to hit you from absolutely everywhere approach, and instead does the I'm just going to work myself to the cage now, and I'm getting to a 4-point, and my elbows are tucked in, and I'm going to start to rise, and my stance is split, and I'm turning myself in. Movsar's just going to just run through him because it's just going to be chain wrestling, chain wrestling, chain wrestling, chain wrestling, chain wrestling, and it's so hard to get out of that sort of systemic pressure. So I think whoever wins the initial battle in each round, because this can change, right? Again, one of the other things that we see from Arnold Allen is he's able to make adjustments. So whatever happens at the start of each round, I think that's generally how that round is going to play out. Now, is Arnold going to be able to stop Movsar getting into those grappling exchanges for 3 rounds? Possibly. I think he has the skills to do it. Is Movsar going to be able to stop Arnold Allen getting into those striking rhythms? Possibly. He has the skills to do it. I think the one thing that is a slight difference, and I don't think it's going to necessarily play out in this fight, is we have seen, when push comes to shove, Arnold Allen is happy to just throw the fucking kitchen sink at a fight. Absolutely fucking happy to say, I'm blind in one eye. Sure, look, here's two hands. Let's fucking go to war, and I'm going to swing until some cunt puts me away. Movsar Evloev, on the other hand, showed against Diego Lopez that same ability is slightly less.
It's fight or flight, baby. That's what we're dealing with here, and that's what we're going to be dealing with in the opener of the card as well. Look at my quick thoughts on that. I mean, there's not too much that I can add on to what you guys have said already. I think dictating where the fight is going to go for both of these guys is going to be very important, and who's going to get their hand raised. And I think that Arnold Allen has the overall set of skills to be able to dictate where this fight goes, where he wants it to be, whether it's on the feet, whether it's him being on top. You know, I think he's just that raw power, and he has that strength to be able to kind of fend off the attacks of Movsar Evloev. And I'll finish off with this, guys. I've got $100 Canadian left to decide, and that baby is going down on Mr. Arnold Allen on Saturday night. Let's just say that. I was blown away that he's the underdog in this fight, to be honest, because I don't know. I've not seen enough from Movsar yet to really make me confident that he has the ability to take out a guy going to the top like Arnold Allen, who, lost to Max Holloway, but still made that, did make that a competitive fight at times as well. So, you know, we got to give him that, but be interesting to see. Check out me and Tio on the betting show. Maybe later on this week we'll talk a little bit more about that. Moving on quickly, we'll absolutely ram through these prelim fights, guys. Spencer, I'll go to you first for Brad Katona against Garrett Armfield. I know that you have been an admirer of Garrett Armfield in some of his fights. He's coming in here against a tricky opponent in Brad Katona. Look at a 13-2, but a very experienced and a very kind of weathered 13-2 in his second official stint inside the UFC. Your thoughts on this one?
Dublin's own Brad Katona, by way of Winnipeg, Manitoba. This is a really interesting fight to me because I think it all comes down to which version of Brad Katona we get. Against Cody Gibson, he accepted that takedowns weren't coming. He decided we're just going to throw hands, and he won the fight. It was wildly entertaining. It was atypical from what we've come to expect from Brad Katona and previously seen from Brad Katona. But if he decides that he wants to go out there and just box it up with Garrett Armfield, he's probably going to get his face boxed off, because this kid is a very good boxer, very quick hands, shows some pop, knocked out Toshiyama Kazama last time out in, I think, 90 seconds or so. Just a straight right hand down the pipe. Good overall young fighter. He's one of these guys that I think because he lost his debut up a division to David Onama, we kind of just went, all right, he's another dude. Then he went back down to his actual division. He got through some injuries. He got through some cancellations, and he had a good showing. This is a really interesting sort of not make or break fight for both guys, but this is one of those ones that guys like me really love, because it's going to tell us a great deal about where each of these guys stand and what they could do going forward. Thought Brad Katona looked great against Cody Gibson, but let's see if you can replicate that against a younger, quicker, better striker.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that you said there. With Brad Katona, for me, it's like you said, he's wantingness, or he's sometimes lack of wantingness to kind of let those hands go. Let that big right hand go. That's all they were saying in the tough house with him all the time. Let that right hand go. Let the right hand go. When he decides to do that, he's always very successful. Moving on, Harry. Charles Jourdain versus Sean Woodson is my under the radar fight of the week for sure. This is going to be absolutely insanity. There's going to be knees. There's going to be elbows. There's going to be cuts and bruises and blood all over the place in this one. I'm sure of it. What do you think of this one?
It's my favorite fight on the card. Full stop, done, finished. Get both of them in there right fucking now. I have a real soft spot for Sean Woodson for very little reason other than that he's a big lanky cunt that fights like a big lanky cunt, and I like it. And Charles Jourdain is somebody that can do all of the things if he turns up. And so the question is, can he turn up? He's a very proud Canadian gentleman. And so I'm sure he'll be full of those energies when it comes to fight night. But this does indeed have barn burner written all the way fucking over it. Phenomenal fight.
Absolutely. I'll have to bring you in for this one, Spencer. It's too good not to get your opinion.
I mean, to me, I just want to see if Jourdain can maintain sort of the tactical awareness and little bit of patience that he's shown these last 2 fights. It's never been a question of talent with him. He's abundantly talented. He's a little undersized for the division. And so facing the long, tall Sean Woodson is going to be interesting. But if he's smart, if he just picks his spots, if he fights a sound game plan that he and Fabio Holanda cook up, I think he wins this fight going away. I think he's significantly better than Sean Woodson. It's just whether he tries to play to the crowd too much or try to get into that barn burner too much. Because we saw against both the Kron Gracie fight and the Ricardo Ramos fight, when he's dialed in, when he's focused on what he needs to do, Charles Jourdain could be a top 15 fighter in this division.
100%. 100%. Like, I think coming into the Kron Gracie fight, he did have the monkey on his back. That was 2 losses in a row going in there. He couldn't take too much chances. Got a win there, like you said, got a win against Ricardo Ramos, and can come in here with a little bit of less pressure on him. And Kiefer Crosby said something excellent to us before he fought Cowboy Oliveira in Portugal last year before he got signed to the UFC. We asked him what kind of a style of fight he wants to fight. And he says, look, he can fight in a number of different ways. He can stand on the outside and fight like a sniper, or he can grab the machine gun and go on the front line and just go at it, hammer and tongue. And I feel that Sean Woodson is the guy that's going to be holding the sniper rifle here. And I feel that Charles Jourdain is going to be the guy that's holding the AK-47. And if he lets loose with that AK-47, he can get at Sean Woodson here. Excellent fight. I'm really, really buzzing for this one. And you should be as well. Definitely check that out. Spencer, over to you. Serhiy Sidey against Ramon Taveras in the bantamweight division. First question to you: can we put on a bad bantamweight fight in the UFC right now? I don't think it's a possibility, and I think that this one is going to live up to expectations as well.
No, impossible to have a bad bantamweight fight. It's the best division in the UFC. I don't want to hear any arguments otherwise. The thing with this one that makes it really interesting, normally this is the spot where people would be like, really, Contender Series grads, and they're getting this kind of spot, and they're getting these 2 dudes fought last September at the Apex. Ramon Taveras was having success on the feet, sniping away, lands a beautiful left hand, and kind of winks and smiles at Serhiy Sidey, who is a guy that fought out here that I know a little bit. Within 30 seconds, Serhiy Sidey hits him with a 2-piece that puts him on the ground, and Kevin McDonald rushes in and stops the fight. And instead of Serhiy being able to celebrate and be really excited that he's earned a first-round stoppage win, we get Dana White and everybody else going, that's the worst stoppage in mankind. We need Ramon Taveras to get another shot. Yeah, sure, with this other guy, but this is a terrible stoppage, and that was the only thing we talked about. So as soon as Ramon Taveras wins his fight on week 10, goes out and trounces some dude, boxes him up. He's a very good boxer. Good quick hands, good power. Right away, Dana White's like, yeah, we're going to do him and that guy that he fought earlier this year, and we'll do that in Toronto. You're getting 2 guys making their debut that have a built-in storyline, and it's bantamweight, and they have 3 minutes of fun tape to go and watch, and they each want to prove they're the better dude. Sign me up. I'm all in. Now, I have, as I said, a little bit of a relationship with Serhiy. He fought out here at BFL a couple of times, and we've talked throughout this journey. He's another guy that is getting that opportunity to fight at home. He's from Burlington, which is about 45 minutes away again. This is great, man. Like, let's go. This is going to be an amazing fight.
Yep, indeed. I agree with that. Gillian Robertson versus Polyana Viana in the 115-pound division. Both of these women, Gillian Robertson coming off that loss against Tabitha Ritchie in her last fight. And I believe Polyana Viana lost her last fight as well. So both of these women coming in off losses. I mean, Gillian Robertson, she's been up and down from 125 to 115. I can't really see any of these women making any great waves. This is, a fight between 2 familiar names on the undercard, and I think that's about as best as we can put that, to be honest. I want to ask your opinion on Sam Patterson coming in here, Harry, against Yohan Lainesse. Coming back off of a pretty big knockout in his last fight. He has had a fight with Nasrat Hasprat cancelled. He's had a long layoff, gladly so. Coming in here against Yohan Lainesse. Sam Patterson and Lainesse, they both hit very hard. This could be a heavy hitting fight. What's your chances that you give to Sam Patterson coming in here, especially after such a devastating knockout in his last fight?
I don't know, because Yohan Lainesse hits hard, and he's got a bit of a gas tank, and he's tough in that first round. Look, we haven't seen at this level where Sam Patterson really is, right? That first fight didn't get going and then it was done, you know? So let's see what happens here. It's a tough second outing. He's being brought in here to face the hometown fighter, to get the crowd nice and riled up. The UFC are expecting and wanting Yohan Lainesse to go out and get a massive win, massive stoppage, first round, second round, something like that. And so if that's what the matchmakers are looking for, then, you know, we can angle towards that. But Sam Patterson has a really, really, really interesting range. He's massive long for the division. And so if he can start to get jabs, get teeps in Yohan Lainesse's face, maybe he can make this a more competitive fight than the matchmakers think it will be.
Yeah, I think Patterson would come in probably with a little bit of the speed advantage, but the power that Lainesse has is something to be looked at here as well. Spencer, we'll head over to you for the last two fights. Jazz Davicius versus Priscilla Cachoeira at 125. Malcolm Gordon versus Jimmy Flick in the 125-pound division. We've got a lot of Canadians fighting in a row. It'll be up to these two. You know, Gordon and Jazz Davicius coming in, trying to get that Canadian kind of momentum building early on the card. It could lead to something magical.
I mean, you would hope, and these are both very favorable matchups. I mean, I have less faith in Malcolm Gordon than I do in Jazz coming out and getting a win. But I mean, I'm happy that Jazz is getting the opportunity, obviously a Niagara top team fighter. So trains down the road in the Niagara region. Malcolm Gordon, a guy that's had success in Canada and abroad prior to getting to the UFC, but has struggled very much in the UFC. Jimmy Flick is 0-2 since returning from his retirement. So one would think that the Canadian should be able to get a victory. Priscilla Cachoeira is one of these fighters that, like, on the right night, Jazz Davicius should be able to run through her. And on the wrong night, it turns into a really bad fight for Jazz. And Cachoeira doesn't go away and shows some, you know, pushback and has a little bit of pop in her hands. And so it's going to be on Jazz to go out there and just wrestle the hell out of her for as long as it takes to get the night started in the right way.
100%. That's it. That's a wrap for the severe setup this week. A full UFC 297 preview. We'll be back next week on the balance breakdown to break down this card in its entirety, is what I was trying to say there. Couldn't get the words out. A pleasure to have my man Spencer Kite on to break down the card. It was great
lovely,
fun.
Boys.
We couldn't have it any other way with a Canadian card. Like I said, interesting fight at the top. Dricus Du Plessis looking to take the crown off of Sean Strickland for the middleweight title. Raquel Pennington and Mayra Bueno Silva fighting for the vacant women's bantamweight title, and lots of other Canadian talent on the card as well. If you're tuning in and enjoy the fights on Saturday night, we will see you next week. And thank you very much for listening. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, give us a share, give us an old comment, try and build us up on the old algorithm there. And watch out for that nifty 1-2 that Spencer Kite is throwing there if you're not watching on the video. It's really scary. Take care, folks. Goodbye then.